Greetings and welcome to the pod. My name is Mark West. Michelle O'Shea is a senior lecturer at Western Sydney Uni, whose research interests dive into the areas of sport, culture and society, particularly with regard to swimming. She has looked into issues such as why swimming lessons for kids are important, as well as the role of the swimming pool in society. Her research particularly examines issues relevant to gender and diversity, and how the pool and the beach, despite the great Australian egalitarian myth, can be quite exclusionary places. I didn't start this conversation with my usual question, because we just started talking. This was fabulous.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because my whole youth was spent swimming. So I started competitive swimming when I was about 9, and it was really something my dad pushed. It was, fabulous. He was actually a velodrome and a road cyclist, and he just sort of felt that that was just too dangerous because of cars and so wanting to get us involved in something. And it's really formed such a substantive part of my life. I put myself through university teaching and coaching swimming, and my first job out of university was working out at Sydney Olympic Park.
Oh, wow.
And and now I've got my own children, and kind of, that's such a significant part of our life. And part of it, why it's significant, is my husband's Irish, so can't swim.
All
And
right, okay.
my late mother-in-law actually said to me, "You've got to promise me that those kids can swim and enjoy the ocean." And look, they're both little water babies. They love it. I mean, Michael's 7 now, and he trains twice a week, and Grace, she's 5, and both of them have been in the pool since they were tiny, just sort of water familiarization. So and then it kind of, I was never going to be an Olympian or sort of make a mark in respect. So I sort of thought, well, what's the next best thing? Well, I can work in sport. So that's sort of where the sort of academia and that's gone. So, and now I'm a volunteer surf lifesaver, and it's just and I live near the ocean. I can look at it right now. So it's almost like it's an affinity, which was pure luck. Might I tell you, absolute luck. We moved up to Nelson Bay, followed my parents up here. They retired, and just very lucky to be here.
Magic.
We say that to the kids all the time. You don't realize how lucky you are.
Yeah, Nelson Bay is beautiful.
It's magic. It really, really is. So my club is Fingal Bay.
Yep.
And it's only something I've come to the last few years, because we sort of enrolled Michael in Nippers, and they didn't have enough parents to do sort of what they call water safety. So you could do kind of like a water safety certificate, or you could do your bronze medallion. I thought, oh, you know what, I'll just do the bronze medallion. So and it's a really fabulous bunch of people, really eclectic, different ages, different life stages. And so in summertime, that's kind of our go-to kind of place. Magic. Still, interestingly, there's far fewer women still involved in it. So I'm always trying to co-opt other mums to come along and, and put their hand up. I mean, look, there are the pragmatics of time and the like, but we've got a really nice patrol of people. So
that's cool.
But I mean, I guess the other thing is I did my first rescue this season, so that was that was pretty full on, a board rescue, because a gentleman had got sort of stuck in a rip, but a local, very familiar with the ocean, but yourself, it just changes so quickly. And so, and then again on that same day, we had another board rescue again. Just people just swimming outside of the flags. My rescue was inside the flags, but unfortunately the other guys were outside. So sort of, anyway, got him to shore, and he was okay, and sent him to hospital just for secondary drowning reasons, because he didn't look well. But I guess it's the beauty and the Yeah, the
That's
perilous kind of bits of it as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's lucky you were there.
Yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, when you train for it and I mean, even as a competent swimmer, as you know your limitations and you want to know sort of the location where you're swimming, but my heart was just pumping a mile because I actually thought he wasn't going to drown, but he thought he might have been having some kind of sort of other issue like a heart attack. And yeah, got him on the board and got him back to the sand, and he was able to stand up and he was fine, but yeah, he just said, oh, I could feel it pulling me out.
Yeah.
So he was very pleased to see me.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I reckon you've probably kind of answered that first question that I
Oh,
would always ask, but
yeah, yeah.
what your relationship with the ocean is. So you've always been a swimmer.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's really interesting because my little boy, God love him, he's so funny. He's been watching Bondi Rescue, like old,
Yep. Yep.
old ones. And he actually said to me not just 2 days ago, he said, oh, when does nippers start back, mummy? I said, oh, look, not for a couple of months yet. And he said, oh, you reckon we could go to the beach this weekend? And I said, yeah, sure. I said, it's going to be pretty bloody
Cold.
cold,
Yeah.
but we could get a steamer, and because he's got a yeah, just a short one. But yeah, it was just interesting that he said, oh, let's go. So I thought, oh, well, we'll see how it pans out. I said, I might not be in,
Yeah.
but you and your sister can get in it. But yeah, so it's no, it's funny. When I saw your note, it kind of got me reflecting,
Yeah.
and what a significant, yeah, kind of part of my life it is. Yeah. And I've not been without it, so I can't imagine what it would be like, not to. Yeah.
Are there
Yeah.
patrols in winter?
No, so I did the last patrol of the season. That was the Anzac Day long weekend. So I think we start back, could be September. Yeah, so the beach is unpatrolled. We're also in a situation where there's paid, and or some of the other beaches up here, Barubi, for example, where there's paid lifeguards, and then there's
The
the
volunteers. Yeah.
volunteers as well. But I think we start back September. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, during the winter, no. And it was very interesting because come that last patrol, the water was still magic. It was really still warm. And being obviously the Anzac sort of that last weekend, the beach was busy actually.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, not like Bondi.
Well, I did press record. Okay,
That's
can
cool.
I
No
use
worries
all
at
that?
all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. No problems whatsoever. Yeah, no, that's cool. No, all good.
Yeah, we were down the coast, the south coast last weekend, and yeah, it's cold. Like it's a different body of water or something. Like it's really freezing down there.
Yeah.
So I had a
God, you're
wetsuit on.
keen. Oh, I was going to say, how far did you swim?
Oh, I did about a K, but
Oh, well done. Okay, yeah.
yeah,
God.
it was probably a really quick K actually because it,
Yeah. To get
it
out of
was bloody
it.
freezing. Yeah. It always is during winter. I mean, up here in Sydney, it's not so bad. You can kind of, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't love it. It's a bit cold,
Yes.
but yeah,
Yeah.
down there it was freezing.
Yeah. It's like you get in and then it's like, oh, okay, I've acclimatized and, off I go.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it's a wind chill when you get out as well.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh,
Yeah.
fair play. I'll let you know if we end up going this weekend.
Hey, yeah.
And
Good
if I
luck.
get more than my toes in.
Yes. Well, I should ask you about just the swimming lessons article that you wrote to sort of to start with. You've obviously taken that on board for yourself and taken your kids to have swimming lessons. That's an
Yeah.
important thing, I guess, if you're living by the coast.
Look, it's so interesting because to me it's one of those literacies. I sort of say to the kids, you English, maths, and you've got to learn how to swim. And notwithstanding it kind of being um an enjoyment thing, it's living where we live. I think that appreciation, and I think the other thing that we've really sought to teach both Michael and Grace, and I think this is true because my husband, is not a competent swimmer, is to be respectful of it. And so, all the time, wherever we go, or be it a lake, be it a river, the ocean, be it a pool, always, I'm talking about the safety aspects of it. And it's quite funny because Michael sort of says to me, I know, mummy, I know. And I said, but it's really easy, I think, for them to become overconfident. And so I'm saying to Michael, you are a really good swimmer and you can very easily swim 50 meters and more, but, things change because of the conditions. But look, for us, swimming lessons, the kids started with those kind of water familiarization classes. And a lot of people sort of, I think, assume that it doesn't have a value. But, young parents of young children, I really encourage them, if you're not going to formal lessons, particularly in that first year or two, just, that familiarization, be it in the bath, be it in the backyard pool, just really getting them accustomed to moving their body in the water. And it's so joyful. The kids love it. And I mean, as I said, a lot of what I did, putting myself through university, was facilitating those kind of classes. But I think one of the really big issues for families, obviously, at the moment is the cost. And, that's where I think certainly in New South Wales, they've got what they call the first lapse sort of rebate. And at the very least, that's a great way to, I guess, incentivize or to, reduce the cost. But I just think that it's an absolute necessity. And as I said, it's almost like a part of it should all be, I think, a significantly greater part of the curricula. And although we have things like intensive swimming lessons in schools, I also question, okay, 2 weeks and then, we don't swim again. And I think that's another challenge. We're very lucky where we are, where the kids swim year round. And so it's heated and it's indoor. But that consistency, and I think the other thing that's really interesting, and I was only talking to one of the swimming instructors at the centre where we take Michael and Grace, and he's lap swimming. He's in what we would call like a mini or a pre-squad. And at the beginning and end of each lesson, she still does survival techniques. And we're only talking about the fact that it's all very well and good that Michael can swim butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, freestyle. But just those constant reminders and that, reaffirming, okay, what do we do if we get in trouble? So, floating on our back, treading water. And so I thought that was just so clever, even, by virtue of safe entry into a pool, into a body of water that you're not familiar with. So, I think that's so important. And as I said, even with Michael being as competent as he is, that still is the beginning and the end of every lesson. Yeah. And I think too, I mean, this is somewhat of a outside of the first question, but I think the other thing is, as parents, that kind of vigilance around water. I just never leave the pool. If they're near a body of water, I'm there, and I'm I'm not on my phone, I'm watching. So interesting.
Yeah, and that it's also fun too, isn't it? Like I think I look at my kids and they had some lessons when they were little, but they didn't love it, so they didn't sort of take it through. But they can swim, and it opens up the fact that they can now go to the pool and stuff around, and it's fun.
Oh, it's pleasure. It's pleasure, isn't it? It's pure joy, to be weightless, and you would have you read the book, The Pool? So it's people's reflections.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, I'll send it to you. There was also an ABC television series, and it was essentially asking, relatively famous Australians to reflect on the significance, of the local swimming pool. And, even just as you say, it conjures ideas about, really hot, because I grew up in Western Sydney, really hot afternoons and, ice cream and hot chips, and then there was Friday night swimming. And I did Royal Lifesaving as well. but you're right. It's just there's so much pleasure and fun to be had, and bombing, into the deep end of the pool. And I think you're right. They don't have to be champion swimmers, and they don't have to be swimming kilometers. But yeah, it is joyful just to be able to jump in a pool and splash around. And yeah, it's so quintessential kind of Australian. But on that idea of the public swimming pool, it's interesting because so many Australians too have their own backyard pools. But I still think it still has that significant kind of, and like being that we live so close to the ocean, we don't have a swimming pool, notwithstanding the substantive cost. I don't know about you, but have you got a pool yourself?
No, we don't have a pool, no. But
Gosh, we just had friends put one in. I think it was like $120,000.
geez.
Just thinking, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, just crazy. And I thought, particularly when, and I think that's the other thing about the local pool. It makes the joy of swimming accessible to anyone. And so yeah, I just think that they have, and notwithstanding the fact that there's such a substantive cost to maintain them, but I think the cost benefit on that is unparalleled. I mean, just in our local area, in spite of the ocean being so close, in the middle of summer, it's vibrant.
Yeah.
And it's a real sort of community space where people go. Yeah.
That's what we've got. So we're in Canterbury. So we've got Canterbury
Oh,
Pool
yes.
just down the road. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of old fashioned. It's outdoors. And I think
Yeah.
they're redoing it to make it all swish and indoors and whatnot. But it has a certain charm at the moment. Hot chips, ice cream,
Yeah.
outdoors, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, look, they're exactly the same as where we are. As you said, there's definitely nothing fancy about it. And yeah, hot chips and slushies. They've got slushies now, Lord, of
Yeah, I
all
love a
different
slushie.
varieties.
Well, you wrote something really interesting about access to pools and for mothers and that type of thing because it is expensive, but it's also kind of hard if you've got a couple of kids and you're one adult. It can be a hard thing to do.
Yeah, and so as I said, that I wrote that piece because essentially a woman had, yeah, I guess, been excluded from a pool by virtue of the fact that there needed to be one adult for every child under six. And as I said in that piece, I obviously intimately understand why that rule exists, but as you said, by virtue of her being a single parent and not having another adult to help supervise, she turned around and went back home. So yeah, I sort of then proposed, because one of the things that I was involved with when I was sort of coming back from having my second baby was a group called Surfing Mums. And it's just a group of women, very much grassroots, and you go down to the beach and you take turns. So, I would sit for 45 minutes with the kids and play while one of the other mums was surfing, and then we tag. And then, so my suggestion was, wouldn't be marvelous to do something similar at our local pools, which would really enable not just women, but we know increasingly fathers are taking on that primary caregiver role, so that they could enjoy the pool, be it for their own pleasure, or also be it to engage with water play and enjoyment with their kids. So yeah, it's really one of those complexities. And it is the case that it is often, I watch, and that, albeit that there's lifeguards there, parents are very distracted by their iPhone or their book. And so while it is the case that this particular woman was going into the swimming pool with both her children, the impost being that by virtue of their age. But I guess there's always nuance in that, because if I look at Grace, who's 5, she can easily swim 50 meters, and she's very capable. And she gets quite upset actually when we go to the local swimming pool. For the littlies, they have to wear a fluorescent band so that they are highly visible. And that's even interesting. I buy, the fluoro sort of swimmers and the rash vests, etc., so that they're easily, because when they're all in the pool and they've all got black or navy, you can't sort of see who's who in the zoo. So I know who's who. But she gets so upset that she has to wear, I don't need that. And I said, well, Grace, it's the rules of the pool, and so I don't yet think she'll get away with it this summer. She'll still probably be wearing that fluorescent armband. But I guess it's looking at ways, both at the grassroots, but also from a facility and a commercial perspective, we can kind of enable access for all. And that's notwithstanding, I guess, the intersections with other categories of difference. So a lot of my research is around equity and inclusion. So, there would be cultural, and you would know, living where you do in Canterbury, that there are cultural and religious and other, I guess, barriers and constraints to some populations' engagement with the pool and the ocean. Yeah.
I've seen it, similar thing, but the other way around, where one of the pools in Enmore has, like, they run like child minding, so mum and dad can go and have a swim themselves.
Yes.
But the kids stay in the playroom. They don't get to have a swim. So
which is a bit kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas with this particular system, it's you and I going to the pool with our kids, and we tag each other. Okay, you take one in, and then and it's again, it's that everyone can be in the pool and everyone can be enjoying it, as well as, particularly when kids are that young, getting that familiarization and that confidence and that sense of space. And
I loved your article on the ocean as well, about sort of, we picture the ocean as like this egalitarian sort of place, but that's not really the history of it in Australia, especially with some of the baths, even in recent times.
Oh, look, it's the I love the nuance and the complexity in all of it. And as you said, there is this kind of assumption that, I guess the ocean is a public good, and it's a space that should be for all. But as we articulate in that particular article, it's anything but that. And I think, in a way, that egalitarian idea almost conceals the ongoing kind of inequities. And a colleague of mine, I'm actually working with her on writing up a paper, actually spent a lot of time with the Burkini babes, or the swim sisters. And so one of the groups that we reference is obviously Muslim women, and the fact that by virtue of their religious and cultural beliefs, it really can be a very inaccessible, very foreign, even a place of fear. But the Burkini is such a wonderful example of that enabling force. And some of these women are incredible swimmers, which is brilliant. And I was actually speaking to another colleague, and they're actually looking at developing a similar program for cycling. And I think that's probably something my research has really come to articulate, is that, because a lot of work I also do is working with Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, and that oftentimes there's safety in those kind of they're culturally safe spaces. And that is not to suggest that those women don't want to, swim or be at leisure or recreation with other women, but that, there is this kind of sense of safety. And the idea of what's really interesting too about Muslim and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women's swimming is the idea of near mentors. So when we kind of think of mentors, we think of elite athletes, but the research also articulates is that, and going back to the swim sisters, the sisters and the aunties, and seeing them swim and seeing the normalization of that activity, then the 6, 7, 8-year-old female that's watching that sees that it's possible. Yeah, so really interesting, and again, issues as they pertain to disability, and we've seen, as you would know, Mark, so many developments and improvements around infrastructure to really enable access. And where I patrol at Fingal Bay, we've got those mats, and
Yep, yep.
again, it just with creativity, and not a great deal of challenge, spaces can just be, so yeah, can be made so inclusive. Yeah,
Are there
yeah.
many sort of women-only baths around the place? I mean, ocean pools have they do exist, I think.
Yeah, so there's the one McCliver's Baths,
Yep.
and even that has, you know, been met with controversy. So I don't know if you know a great deal of the history of it, but they actually have an exemption under the Discrimination Act. So that will, and be retained as a women's only bath. But there were some aspersions around transgender women's ability to attend the baths, and the like, which seem to have resolved themselves. But it's really interesting. The gentleman that brought the legal action or sought to have that bath, I guess for both men and women, it makes you, it really, when you read the stories of, because there's a book that speaks to McIver's baths, and the fact that this is a safe space, and that women, and one particular woman was talking about being very heavily pregnant and just wanting to be in the ocean to alleviate all those aches and pains. And she said she just felt at ease to be pregnant, very, very pregnant, in a space with other women. And I think that's the other thing, that idea of the masculine gaze, and be it, actual or perceived, this is a space where women, do feel that they belong. And I think that's also something really interesting, because the literature, we've often talked about kind of disability and inclusion, but just being invited isn't the same as this idea of belonging. So it was very interesting to read those women's stories about that sense of belonging, and that there was this space where, yeah, they were outside of the gaze, and that they could just kind of be in the ocean. Doesn't matter what their body was, doesn't matter what their cultural or religious beliefs were, that they were just able to be. Yeah, which I
Yeah,
thought was so interesting.
that's really
Yeah,
interesting, isn't it?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I guess sort of slightly different theme, but you get that sense of belonging. But then on some of the beaches, there can sometimes be a sense of ownership. I guess we saw in the Cronulla riots and that sort of thing. This is ours. This is, no one else is allowed here.
Yeah, and again, it's those kind of exclusionary practices, and yeah, I mean, what a blight Cronulla was. But you know, I, as you say, it really illuminates how spaces are, yeah, constructed, um, and it's almost the unspoken practices. So we know that's not offence, but yeah, that sense that it wasn't a welcome space. And then we obviously saw that anger and the aggression that transpired. So yeah, it's almost like a subculture. And as you say, I think Cronulla really bubbling to the surface, and providing a context where we could see the barriers, because often they're not physical, but it is that the sense that I don't belong. It's the stare that you receive, or it's maybe the snide remark. But that's interesting too, because the bikini babes talk about, when they first started to wear the bikini, that they did feel that they were not othered, but this sense that they kind of stood out. But what they also speak about is it can be a way to engender a conversation, a respectful conversation about religiosity or culture. And I thought that was really interesting. But I think the other side to that is that the labor always falls on those others
Yeah.
to educate, you know,
Yeah, they'd
the
rather not be having that conversation, right? Like
yeah,
just want to be.
exactly. And I mean, you know, look at what's happened in France. I mean, they've essentially banned those women from wearing the bikini, which is, you know, quite ludicrous to me. You know, certainly as a middle-aged woman having had 2 kids, you know, I'm not wearing a string bikini. So, you know, I'll very often wear board shorts, and by virtue of living in Australia too, and the sun, I'll always have a long sleeve rash vest on and a hat. So is it any different?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And again, it's that idea of what isn't and isn't permissible, and who kind of decides.
yep.
And as you said, particularly against the backdrop of this egalitarian, it's for kind of everyone. Yeah,
Do you think
yeah.
that that's what makes the beach such a lightning rod? Like you're standing there wearing next to nothing. You can be seen if you're wearing a bikini or a string bikini, or if you've
Yeah.
got darker skin, or if you're a guy or a girl or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, it's that idea of being seen. And it is the case, as you said, that there are those that want to be seen. But then there are others that would rather not, you know, be seen. But I think it's interesting when we talk about you know, brown and white bodies. And, you know, when we think about swimming and when we think about oceans, you know, that space has been physically and culturally dominated by white Anglo, you know, Westerners. And it's really interesting when I'm on patrol, particularly in the region where I live, we get lots and lots and lots of people from Sydney coming up for a holiday. And you know, it's wonderful to kind of see them at the beach. And they're often the first people that will come across and actually talk to you about what's the ocean like today, or, you know, is what's the water temperature like, what's the tide like. It almost seems to be that they're more cautious, and I think sometimes that's a good thing as well, because they know their kind of limitations. Or, you know, it is the case that you know, very sadly, up in Fingal this year, we had a family that weren't swimming inside the flags, and unfortunately, one of the elder relatives went into assist a younger child who was struggling, and unfortunately, you know, he was in a rip, and he did lose his life. So I think that's also really important too, is to make sure that those new Australians, yeah, again, have got that opportunity to enjoy the beach, and that you know, that they have the requisite skills and knowledge as well. But you know, when I certainly think about the ocean patrols, and when you think about surf lifesaving, you know, it is dominated by white Anglo-Western men. You know, even just very recently, there was constitutional change. There was some wording changes in our constitution where it had always talked about chairman,
Yeah, right.
and it's
Okay.
sort of like, well, hang on a minute, you know,
Yep.
that's definitely legacies of the past. And or it talked about men as distinct from, you know, men and women, or, you know, why do we need the gender preface anyway?
Yep.
It's just life savers, surf life
Yep.
savers. So yeah, really interesting. So I think too, you know, encouraging and providing space, you know, and again, that's if it is something that those communities want to be a part of, you know, really inviting their contribution. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting. Do you see improvements here? Things are getting better.
You know, I get asked this question just in respect to my research about women's involvement in sport. And, you know, increasingly I'm kind of thinking just change isn't linear. And I see some changes, and then, you know, and this is quite outside of, you know, what we're talking about in terms of swimming, but I am involved in lots of other sporting clubs. And I'll never forget this day, you know, I've done an undergraduate degree in sport management. I've got an honours degree in sport management. I've got a PhD in sport management. And, you know, I've been around sport for so long. And one of the fathers said to me, oh, look, just leave it to us. You just look after the kids. And I just sort of thought, oh God,
God.
but it's interesting though, because, you kind of internalize some of those gendered discourses and norms because, and as I said, I'm on such a great patrol of people, and the lads are always encouraging, come on, Michelle, you put the equipment in and out, and you use the trailer, and this, because it's not naturally something I'm around all the time, and so obviously we've got people with a whole matter of professional skills and expertise. So yeah, I drove the tractor up and down the beach, and I was kind of quite chuffed at myself. I'm in the yuppie going up and down the beach, and that's because there is this just have a go. So yeah, I do think it depends, culturally, where you are, and I think change isn't linear. I think it's better than what it was, but where we started from is a bit of a challenge. Yeah, but again, I think it's ensuring that the labor of the change isn't always on those others, that it is that it's almost that idea of allyship in a way. But hopefully it's becoming more egalitarian. But as I said, just, and people might think that language is just a matter of semantics, but it matters, doesn't it? We know language constructs meaning. So those changes, they really do. They do matter. Yeah.
I do notice it, like just the normal weekend warrior ocean swims on the weekend, that there'll often be swims where there are more women than men.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty popular at that sort of level. It's not always the case, but and I haven't looked at it by age. So I'm sure that
Yeah.
varies, but it seems pretty egalitarian in that sense.
Yeah. And it's so interesting you say that, because when I think back to, swimming and squad swimming, and it was very gender balanced in terms, and, I just think of a really poignant image just before the postponed Japanese Olympic Games. And there was the Australian swim team, and it was pretty much 50-50.
Yep.
And we know, how successful both our men's and women's teams are. And more recently, in particular, our women have just, excelled. And then you looked at the coaches and the support staff, and that was all blokes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's where we're seeing, as you said, at that participatory level, it really is kind of 50-50 all but when we then start to look at coaching, and when we look at administration, and we look at governance, that's where it seems like those changes, that gear shift hasn't changed. And it's interesting, I see a narrative around, oh, well, we've got one of those, so we've got a female coach.
Right.
But again,
Yeah.
think about the pressure on that, that first coach. And then I'm also, I think about calculative discourses, and I think, but numbers can conceal what's going on in the background as well, in terms of that sense of inclusivity and belonging. But I think, definitely from a participative perspective, swimming is one of those sports that really has seen a significant, it's a significant gear shift. But it's more at that coaching and governance level. Yeah.
Do you think that's so? Do you think there's still active barriers there for women to get into coaching and that sort of thing? And I guess you see that in other areas of life as well, in senior management and all the rest of it. Or do you think it's more, I guess the men have had more professional experience because those barriers haven't been there for them in the first place?
Yeah, look, it's that kind of chicken and egg
Yeah.
metaphor all the time, isn't it? I think there's two things at play. And I don't necessarily, because you use the word active, because I think you're right. I don't think it's always that it's something that people are inherently aware of. And it's almost like this kind of inherent bias, this kind of subconscious bias, which we know has been reported about. That being said, however, my doctoral research actually looked at women and men's careers in Australian sport organisations at the national and the state level. And so many of the women administrators actually did talk about kind of overt discriminatory kind of practices. But what was more impactful, and certainly what came across through the interviews, because I spoke to 60 administrators across 4 organizations. And it was the case that it was more the informal, and it was kind of the subtle, unspoken practices. So, yeah, I think there's certainly some cultural issues. But when we look at the success of our female swimmers, it's not like we've got a dearth of talent that we could be putting through a pathway and enabling their kind of whole of life involvement in the sport. So, you know, I don't support quotas and affirmative action, but I certainly think that there can be strategic ways to incentivize and encourage and to kind of provide pathways that, you know, bring the next generation along. But again, thinking about those intersections of difference, you know, intersections of class, of color, of gender.
Yep.
And again, that image was very much white Anglo-Western male coaches.
Yep.
So it's that idea of those others. And again, coming back to the very premise of our conversation, is that swimming, be it in the ocean, be it in a swimming pool, be it at the grassroots or the competitive level, is for everyone. But when we start to pull it apart, yeah, there are these kind of barriers and constraints. So, yeah, looking at how we can structurally make changes, and then how we can kind of shift the gear in terms of, you know, what's seen to be normal. Because I know there was one particular respondent that I spoke to, and they were talking about the Australian swim team, and they were going into camp, and there was indeed a female coach. And so she had young children. So what they'd essentially organized was for her to be accompanied by her mother. So her mother could look after the kids while, you know, and so this particular male respondent was talking about the fact that that was a really easy fix, but that it wasn't necessarily seen positively by everyone. Yeah, but I mean, when you think about it, if someone's got skills and expertise, and particularly in high performance environments, we want to look at how we can enable it. We want the best of the best. So this particular woman was. So what do? Well, we enable her to travel with, and you know, in this case, her mother, and so the kids can be doing what they're doing, and you know, that she can be focused on her coaching. Yeah, but it might very well be the reverse as well. Maybe it's a male coach that doesn't want to spend months away from his kids, and why not then enable that travel? So yeah, it's you know, we think about it in workplaces as the unencumbered masculine norm. So yeah, I think there's nuances and complexities around that as well.
Yeah, I think that's what's lost sometimes in these debates, and you know, online debates are never good. Um, but that a lot of these things are helpful for men as well. I'd love to, you know, it would enable my life a lot if I could take my kids somewhere, you know, to
Yeah, and I
do those
mean,
sorts of things.
and that's where, you know, I think that's because we know we can sell the business case, but as you said, it's what are the benefits there for all employees, and we're talking about coaches at the moment, but we all benefit from, as you said, that kind of undertaking. But yeah, it's interesting. I think COVID has shifted the dial on it, and it hasn't. But one thing that I did notice was during COVID, and obviously you've lived through this in your household, is I remember it was just quite stark, was you know, I did have lots of eye rolling when we had you know, I'd be on a Zoom call, and then Grace would be, you know, doing something, or Michael would want, you know, a sandwich. And I was like, come on, guys, I'm on a meeting. It's important. But I just remember sitting there watching, and Ollie, my husband, had a Zoom board meeting, and he was downstairs. We call it the bunker. And the kids and I were upstairs, and Grace was really naughty, and then ran downstairs and opened the door, and, you know, and when she did that, and everyone was like, oh, that's so gorgeous. And I thought, would everyone have said that was so
Yeah,
gorgeous
you're not
if
getting
Grace
that.
jumped on my lap? You know, it was because there was the father. And look, it was great that there was visibility around his parenting role, etc. But I thought, I wonder how that'd be perceived if it was one of the female board members and their child, you know,
Yeah.
jumped in, and yeah. But Yeah, I mean, look, we all kind of try to. I mean, I have, tried to conceal my mothering and fearful about what that impost is on my career. But I think now I've just kind of done away with it. And I'm like, hey, I'm not helping anyone if I'm trying to be
Yeah.
super person. Yeah, but I think it's really interesting. And I think that you're right, Mark. It's bringing the nuance to the fore, problematizing, and often just kind of sitting with ideas. People are so quick to, naysay, and yeah, it's interesting.
Thinking when you were talking about the management in sport, I watched the netball final the other night. Netball seemed to have it cracked.
Yeah, tell you what, such a phenomenal sport. And my fear for netball is all the talent that we've had in netball going to go to other
Oh, that, I
sports?
mean,
We're starting to see it kind of happen. Yeah, it's interesting because again, thinking back to some of the research and the interviews I did, is that oftentimes it's been the case that male sport administrators see women's sport as kind of like a stepping stone
mhm.
to the, but it's the real deal nowadays. I mean, I don't necessarily think that's as the case as it once was. It's, yeah, we've got that professionalism coming along, notwithstanding the challenges. But yeah, I mean, just thinking about the Women's World Cup
Mhm.
tonight's going to be interesting. My husband's Irish.
Ah, of
Um,
course, yes.
yeah, I mean, I think 12 of the 32 coaches are women.
Okay.
So, it's changing slowly, but when you look at netball, yeah, I think they've really, and then it could be argued that exclusionary in terms of men as well. I don't know, but and one of their growth strategies is actually around men's involvement
Yep.
in the sport. And we know some of the fantastic coaches and umpires of netball are men as well. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch that professional women's sport space, particularly by virtue of just the on-field talent. We've got all these sports that are vying, but I mean the pathways for young girls and women nowadays, yeah, just incredible.
I
Yeah.
think is it the rugby sevens men's and women coaches just swapped recently.
Mm,
So there's no,
yeah.
and the women are I would say uh, are the shining example, the gold medalists. So
Yeah.
that maybe that's the plumber job. I don't know who gets paid more, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's the other issue, isn't
yeah,
it? It's like scratch the surface just a little bit more. But I mean, look, that we saw the Matildas coming out and talking about pay equity as well. So I guess it's just kind of pushing that barrow and just chipping away. Yeah.
yeah. I don't think the swimmers get paid all that well. I imagine there's a gender disparity, but I don't know.
And the thing about, it's, and the other sport I've been watching is obviously the Tour de France. I
Mm.
mean, that is just grueling. And I think when I think about swimming and I think about cycling, they're just unbelievable athletes. Their training regimes are absolutely incredible. And, I think there has been some moves to kind of look to professionalize aspects of swimming. Yeah, we obviously had the Americans and the Aussies and the kind of the swim
Or the
off,
jewel in
and
the pool, or yeah,
yeah. And I think it would be really marvelous to kind of actually see more of that. And yeah, I also think about, just the contribution of be it male or females to swimming. I mean, we kind of hang our hats on the success of the Australian swim team always. But yeah, just incredible to kind of see the depth of talent and just their sheer regimes of training. Unreal. But I guess with all sports, it's also making sure that they're safe contexts, and we know that swimming, gymnastics, football, soccer itself have had issues. So yeah, again, that goes back to that idea of inclusivity, fun, and creating safe spaces for everyone. Yeah, yeah.
So what do you think's next in your research? What are you working on now?
Oh my goodness, so much going on at the moment. One project we're just publishing on a paper on at the moment is actually relevant to women and girls' participation in organised sport, particularly from communities of disadvantage. So, and as I said, a lot of my research is also interested not just in issues around gender, but intersections with class, culture, and religion. So, our research has found that there was a council did what was called a women's sport roadshow, and it was really to introduce young girls to all different sports, be it rugby, be it netball, and what we found was that it was the first time that they'd actually been involved in any kind of structured activity of that kind. Yeah, so circling back, I guess, to where we started around the cost of organised sport, one of the really big barriers for women and girls was that, and this particular community has a high representation of new Australians, and they said that there was, say, 3 or 4 children in the family. The eldest son got to have an activity, then the second son, and then unfortunately by the time they got to the daughter having an opportunity, they just couldn't afford it. So really looking at then, how can we enable access? And two, we know that it's contingent on parents being able to drive their kids, and it's volunteer orientated. So really looking at then what should be the kind of strategic governmental kind of response to enabling that that kind of access. But then on kind of the management and the leadership side is looking at issues as it relates to how we actually engender that greater involvement of those others. And as I said, my PhD really articulated that, while there were challenges for women, it was also the case that if you weren't a white Anglo-Western, 56-year-old woman, male, 56-year-old male, then, developing your career was quite problematic. And so lots of male respondents actually talked about, if you wanted to be an involved father, or if you were taking on a primary caregiver role, that the implications for their career were dire. So really looking at, how we can create spaces. And I think the important part of all of this is that my research has involved national and state sport organisations, and they're funded by the public purse. So they should be equitable, and they should be inclusive, and as I said, moving toward that idea of belonging. But finally hoping to speak with the group of women that have manifested out of the Swim Sisters. They're now looking to develop what's called the Cycling Sisters. So again, looking at women's non-traditional involvement from that particular COLD community in sport and physical activity. And what I think is really interesting, what I'm seeing is that while we've got those kind of traditional governance structures, and we've got grassroots level associations and national and state sport organisations, there's lots happening at the grassroots, and lots of organic self-organising. So that's why I reference Surfing Mums as an example. So it doesn't have an affiliation or an association with Surfing Australia. And so we're starting to see more of that. I think, yeah.
What about your next swimming career or ocean
Oh
career?
my goodness!
What's next?
Oh, I've got to. I tell you what, we all have to do re-accreditation.
Yep.
So better get practicing. Although I must say that I was number one in my cohort for resus. So I was definitely got that down pat. So it'll be getting back out the board and practicing some rescues. But my husband also did buy me some surfing lessons. So
Awesome.
I've been trying to stand up on a surfboard. I cannot do it. And so I'm like, I'm going to be able to do that by the end of next summer. So when I check in with you, you're going to have to ask me.
Yes.
So that's the next thing for me. And then it sounds like maybe this weekend I may be putting my toes in the ocean here.
Yeah, it does sound like it.
Yeah.
Are you going to get your husband's Irish blood out in the ocean?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I tell you what, he walks around with a t-shirt and shorts. So if anyone can
So you should be
bear
able
it,
to do it, yeah.
it'll just be that he'll be wading, I think, is distinct from swimming. Actually, it's quite funny whenever he does because I've been getting him a kickboard and flippers to kind of just get him to, and he does like 50 meters of kicking on the board with flippers. He said, I need a sandwich. He's starving. But actually, one funny story I will tell you, when he did come out to Australia, we did, because I tried to teach him how to swim, and you know what it's like. Trying to teach a partner how to do anything, just forget about it.
Yeah.
So I said, look, go along to some swimming lessons. And Ollie's about 5'8", 5'9", so he's not an overly tall guy, and a very good friend of ours. He wasn't a particularly competent swimmer, and he said, oh well mate, I wouldn't mind coming along with you either. And so his mate is 6'7", and there's Ollie, 5'8". So there's the two of them on the edge of the pool, and no word of a lie, then in the next, there was these 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and it was just the best picture. And I think that's the thing about swimming. Adults shouldn't be afraid to learn later in life. But again, for Ollie, it's just been, I think getting over the fear of it as well. And that's it. Swimming is just, it's a skill for life.
Wow, a friend from work, hi Tim, if you're listening, he said to me, you should talk to someone about adult swimming lessons, because he listens and he really wants to be able to feel the enjoyment that we feel in the water and in the ocean, but he doesn't have it. He never grew up with it.
Yeah. And so, that would be my encouragement to Tim. You must ring up your local swim school, because very often they will have, adult only lessons, and you can usually do it in a small group. Because it just unlocks, as just the joy of swimming. So that's going to, definitely that should be something you should be pushing him to do. Come on, adult swim lessons. So look, and Ollie's mate, he's a really competent swimmer. He's kind of really kept it up. And but I love the image of it. And all the kids were kind of high-fiving Ollie when he was doing his breathe and bubble ride.
I don't think the deep end's going to pose any problems to him.
No, definitely not.
Oh, that's funny. That's cool.
Oh, you've made my day. It was so nice to talk about that, because you don't really talk about it very often. I was just going to say, the other thing I was thinking about when you said about inclusive spaces, when I started my job out at Sydney Olympic Park at the Aquatic Centre, so I was part of the rebranding after the Sydney 2000 Olympics, and the tagline was 26 degrees all year round. So I never used to wear a jacket to work. But it was really interesting to me that because I was so accustomed to that environment, I'd swum my whole life, and I remember we were doing a famil for the venue. So it was an organization wanting to host an event there. And it made me look at it in a different way. We smell the chlorine and all those kinds of, and people would walk in and say, oh my gosh, it's so hot. Wow, the chlorine. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? It's interesting when you kind of look at it with a new set of eyes, and you look at, the ocean, or you look at a swimming pool as a first time user.
Yep.
Because we've got the script down pat, we know how it all kind of works. So that just sort of came as a memory that thinking about, if I was a first time user, how welcomed would I feel? What might be some of the barriers?
Those feelings, I mean, they probably brought back lovely memories of your childhood and all the rest of it, but they're quite foreign if you've never been there before.
And look, even just this conversation, my dad, it's really been a way to have forged this lovely relationship, because every morning when he'd wake me up at kind of 5 o'clock for swim training, he'd always be this another famous person on the phone. He'd be like, "Oh, Shelley, Michael Jackson's on the phone," or it's quite funny. And then I'd hear the tinkle of him pouring sugar into his cuppa, and then I was like, okay, I've got to get up because we've got to go soon. But great. He was a timekeeper, and every weekend, and that's the thing I think with swimming. My parents really, and I think Dad in particular, he liked it because we were at swimming at 5:30. We did our session. We went to school. Then we were back at the pool at 4:30 on the weekends. We were at swimming carnivals. He knew exactly where we were.
Yep.
And it was a way to kind of foster, I guess, friendships with like-minded kids and kind of families. So, yeah. And then Friday nights was, it was obviously Friday night swimming, and the joy of that with my own kids. It's great.
So you must be pretty good. You might have undersold your abilities here a little bit.
Oh, look, it was a past life. Yeah. Look, I was all right. I got to, state finals and things, but I was never going to be, anyone too special. But it was, I think it taught me a lot, actually, just that, being resilient and, I guess keeping to a schedule and
a lot of discipline involved.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I've got lifelong friendships from the sport. And as I said, I coached and I think I would probably say, the academic track that I took, has also been by virtue of that too. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, and lots of commitment from your parents as well, 5 a.m. starts and all that.
Huge commitment. I'll be so, I just think, wow, and even, Dad, it's funny, I've looked at, I've got all my old trophies and, oh God, Dad was meticulous with it all. And he had my PBs and, some of the old books that he's got. And even just, the programs of events. Actually, there's I swam at the very first swimming carnival out at Sydney Olympic Park.
Oh, wow.
At the Aquatic Centre. Yeah. So I swam at the very first, that very first carnival. So, really, as you said, happy times.
That would have been before super suits and that sort of thing as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, gosh. Hasn't that all changed? Like just the technologies around swimming, absolutely, unbelievable. Can you imagine, the Dawn Frasers of this world?
Yeah, no, you can't compare anymore. That's kind of the science nerd in me kind of, the tech's cool, but I can't really compare it anymore, It's
I mean, well, what did they say about Sydney 2000? They said was one of the aquatic venue was one of the fastest pools in the world by virtue of its anti-wave technology.
Yeah.
And really interesting. But I mean, just that pool in and of itself, that's such a fabulous legacy of that games.
Well, that's a good thing. Yeah, I mean, that's the topic of this week, isn't it? With Victoria pulling out of the Commonwealth Games and all the legacy and the lack thereof they'll have now. But is it worth the cost? It's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and even just thinking about the Women's Football World Cup as well. We think about cost benefit, but it's increasingly about opportunity cost. And I think, even just thinking about Sydney 2000, because obviously we've been talking so much about legacy. We really had that venue legacy, which was absolutely incredible. And Western Sydney didn't have a pool like that, so there was this kind of need. But I think when we look at Sydney 2000, the economic impact was actually a bit benign, and it was the challenge for Sydney 2000, as you would remember, it was SARS and September 11.
Yeah.
We really hinged the finance of that of inbound tourism post the games, and we really didn't get that. So I'd love to know the legal ramifications of the Victorian government pulling out of it. And also there's been speculation from the Commonwealth Games Federation about what the overrun would have been by virtue of cost, because Dan Andrews and the Victorian government had these 5 hubs, which were going to be, outside of Melbourne. And they said, well, if you just brought everything back into Melbourne to the existing facilities, we wouldn't have the issue. Because, they were looking at movable infrastructure and, so definitely an interesting story to to kind of
Yeah.
watch.
I
I'm
mean,
glad I'm not then. That's all I can say.
no, that's well, Melbourne. I mean, you'd imagine Melbourne would have the infrastructure to host it very quickly. I mean, I'm sure there are costs and all sorts of things I don't know about, but you know,
Yeah. So it's they've come out, the federation, and said, well, we told you not to do regional hubs. We told you to host it in Melbourne. So that's going to be really kind of
yeah,
interesting.
probably
Yeah.
buying the AFL off for 2 weeks of the MCG is probably the cost.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is the other issue, isn't it? It's that kind of negotiations. Yeah, because I think they were going to have the opening ceremony there, weren't they?
Oh, I
I
don't
think
know.
they, yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, what do we care to
yeah, that's right. Hosted in Nelson Bay.
Yeah.
Thanks so much to Michelle for taking over an hour to talk to me, and I really enjoyed listening back to that when I was putting it together. If you'd like any more information on anything you've heard today, get over to the website at www.thepodpodcast.net. That's www.thepodpodcast.net. And there you'll find links to Michelle's work, to the music that's been used in this episode, and you can comment and rate if you want as well. Thanks very much. I'll catch you next time on The Pod.